gotta shake it, come on, yeah. I wanna lift my feet off the ground. Come on, let's dance around. We gotta shake it, come on, yeah. I wanna get my feet off the ground. Come on and dance around. We gotta shake it, come on, yeah. I wanna lift my feet off the ground. Come on, let's dance around. Come on, let's dance around, yeah. Come on and dance, let's celebrate. Come on and dance, let's celebrate. Come on and dance, let's celebrate. Come on and dance, let's celebrate.
My name's Will Smith. I'm the state senator representing Silver Spring and Tacoma Park. And so I want to first say thank you all for being here. We are about to go into our legislative session in Annapolis in January. So I thought that this was an opportune time to have this conversation to, I think, bolster our legislative efforts as we move forward. But also, I've been having a lot of conversations with constituents, neighbors, friends, family, and I know that this feels like somewhat of a disorienting time for many of us. And when you think of this in context, there have been waves of anti-Semitism, xenophobia, anti-immigrant sentiment, isolationism, populism. All of the isms have come in waves, and in the last 15 years, you've obviously seen that kind of come to the fore all across Europe and in the United States, from Viktor Orban, Geert Wilders, Marine Le Pen, you name it, from Prague to Paris to the UK to Donald Trump and here in the United States. You've seen the rise of anti-immigrant sentiment. And one thing that we all know is that these movements have clearly missed the mark, because immigrants from everywhere in every country have always revitalized, infused new energy, economic mobility, have been the economic drivers and engines, have been really the life's blood of any nation. And that's true in the United States. In the United States here, we have a population of about 342 million. About 48 million people here are immigrants. We naturalize about 800,000 people every year. To go through that process, you have to go through a lengthy process. You're going to take a test. You're going to take an immigration test. It's comprised of a battery of 100 questions. You're going to be given 10. You're going to have to answer 6 correctly. You know that the passage rate for the first-time taker of that test is, for an immigrant trying to come to the United States, is? It's 91%. Okay? That same test was given to 3.5 million Americans across the country. All right? And in only one state did a majority of first-time takers pass. You know what that state was? Maryland. It was unfortunately not Maryland. It was Vermont. But that tells you something, doesn't it? People are coming here by choice, not by accident of birth. And they're coming here to contribute mightily to our experiment. And so as we in Maryland think about what we're going to do to fight back against a number of these efforts that have been coming down from the Trump administration, I thought this was just a perfect time to convene this conversation. Immigrants make up 16.7% of the population in Maryland and responsible for $33 million of economic activity in Maryland every year. There are 100,000 taxpayers that feed money into our schools, to our roads, our infrastructure, and support our state mightily. Also, immigrant population coming to Maryland has really infused more growth, because we have experienced a lot of out-migration lately. And so the only reason we've been able to plateau and sustain our population is because we have a vibrant and healthy immigrant population. So this is a great opportunity for us to kind of discuss what's happening in Maryland, what we can do, and I'll also open it up for dialogue and conversation. So we're going to have a conversation together, and then I want to open it up for dialogue so that you can discuss amongst each other and ask me questions, ask our legal expert here questions about procedure and the law and the legal landscape in Maryland. And then the final stage is what's next? What are we planning for the next legislative session? I want to offer some thoughts for you, but then also hear back what you think we should be doing in the next legislative session. So with that, I'm going to start here. This is going to be kind of a fireside chat. So I have a couple questions, but before we get into the questions and an introduction, I do have some thank yous to dole out here. So for the Tacoma Park City, I do want to thank Jesse Carpenter, Ryan Kelly, and Alvaro Calabia for being here and for facilitating this gathering today. And then from CASA Maryland, I have to thank CASA for all of the work that they have done to support our community, to support our state, and in Annapolis, a constant, yes, clap it up, a constant and effective presence. So Amma Frimpong, I'm going to give you your introduction in a second, but the legal director, Kat Jackson, Alex Vasquez, Nympha Amador, Viviana Lozano, Eden Aaron, all from CASA, and also Edward Garcia and Alba Mota are here. So I wanted to say thank you for all of your work as well. And before we get into our conversation, I do want to introduce Amma. It's a pretty impressive resume here, so I don't want to mess this up. So you serve as the legal director for CASA. You're a nationally recognized attorney and leading advocate for immigrant justice or immigration justice. Since joining, you've been with CASA since 2022.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
You led landmark litigation, including challenges to the Trump administration's attempts to end birthright citizenship under the 14th Amendment. You also have fought to protect the temporary protected status, TPS. You've spearheaded efforts to limit harmful collaborations between law enforcement and our communities through the 287G program. And most recently, and I think very impressively, you're part of the legal team representing Kilmar Obrego Garcia in the nationally significant case highlighting justice for immigrant workers and families. So I want to thank you for that work as well. And you're a brilliant attorney. So thank you and welcome, Amma, for all of your work. And so I know you've got some slides here that will help us kind of walk through the legal landscape in Maryland with regard to immigration law. But to start us off, can you just talk to us about what are you seeing, what's happening with loved ones, neighbors, family members? What trends are you seeing since the latest administration has come into office? And can you give us some of the highlights in terms of the data points that you'd like to accentuate?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Can you all hear me? I'm good on microphone. So first of all, thank you so much, Senator Smith, for bringing us together in this space. And really, Senator Smith gave so many thank yous, gave people flowers. We must also give him his, right? Senator Smith has been such a champion for the immigrants community for many, many years. He really has been a partner, close ally for us, and really represents, right, the fact that everyone within the community, regardless of immigration status, must be protected, right? And so we want to say thank you. Thank you for having us here. Thank you for continuing to fight for us, continuing to show up for us. And we're looking forward to the next legislative session, doing it all over again. And please, yes, a round of applause. And then also, obviously, a huge thank you to all of you for coming today, right? I mean, we have seen so much inhumanity and we have seen so much cruelty over the last 11 months, 10 months. I don't even know anymore. It feels like 10 years already, right? But we have seen so much. And it's so important that we continue to show up because this is important, right? We need to continue to show up so that we make clear we are paying attention and we will not continue to allow what has been happening to continue, and certainly not in our state of Maryland and certainly not in Montgomery County, which is clearly, right, such a beautiful, diverse place for all of us. And so thank you for showing up. I was asked to make an announcement that anyone who needs interpretation, Spanish language interpretation, to please see Alex over here. So with that, I want to jump into answering the question that you asked me. And I want to start with a story that came to light a couple of weeks ago. I don't know how many of you have seen the news story and video of, her name is Rabiatu. She's a Sierra Leonean woman who was living here in Maryland. Rabiatu, who has lived in this state for 30 years, no criminal history whatsoever. She has U.S. citizen children, U.S. citizen grandchildren. By all accounts, Maryland is her home. The United States is her home. Rabiatu was granted a form of immigration protection that prohibits her from being deported to her home country, Sierra Leone, because she will be persecuted if she's sent there. For many years, she's been checking in with ICE without issue. She goes in, she's like, I still live at this address, I still have no criminal history, yes, I have my kids, my grandkids. ICE says, go forth, no issues. This year was different. She was arrested, kept in the Baltimore holding room at 31 Hopkins Plaza, sent down to a detention center in Louisiana, and was deported to Ghana, not her home country, to Ghana, a third country. There is video of her being dragged by Ghanaian officials to be put on a plane to then be deported to Sierra Leone, the very country that a judge said that she would be persecuted, harmed, killed if she were deported there. So that's what we're seeing. And I wish that I could say that that was a rare story, but unfortunately that is the norm. That is the norm. What happened to her is what we're seeing every single day now. So when people ask me what is happening, what is going on, what are the trends, plain and simple, we are under attack. Our immigrant community is under attack. And what this attack looks like is a mass, I have a clicker, yo. I forgot that I have a clicker. Oh my goodness. Which is appearing in the form of mass detention, mass deportation, and I'm someone who speaks very, very freely, very, very openly. Mass detention, mass deportation fueled by a false narrative of white supremacy, right? That a certain kind of person deserves to be in this country and a certain kind of person does not. And so as part of this mass detention agenda, ICE has a quota of 3,000 arrests per day nationally. The way that's playing out within the state, right, again, is you have people like Rabiatu who are not a public safety, who under previous administrations would never have been arrested by ICE, and now at routine ICE check-ins and even at routine naturalization interviews, where people are going to be interviewed to become citizens of this country, are being arrested and rapidly deported. So right now, according to data we received in November, we have approximately 65,135 people in ICE custody. That number in November 2024 was 36,683. So that's almost double the number of people who are in ICE custody compared to a year ago. In Maryland, we don't have, at least I have not seen the updated numbers that just came out in November, but through July 2025, that number was 2,280, which far surpassed the entire 2024 numbers of people who had been arrested. And it's very important to understand that this isn't only, quote, criminals are being arrested, right? This isn't the worst of the worst, as we were told. Absolutely not. It's everyone. It's Rabiatu, the grandmother, right, who's been here for 30 years. That's who's being arrested. 74% to 80%, depending on the numbers you look at, have no criminal conviction whatsoever. We're seeing the arrests are becoming more and more violent every day. So we have gone from windows being smashed that we were seeing back in March, April, to people actually being brutalized, people being beaten up when they're being arrested, people who are not resisting arrest being physically assaulted. we're hearing reports of torture in ICE facilities. We're hearing and seeing even the holding rooms, right? The Baltimore holding room, because as I'm sure you all know, or hopefully you all know, in Maryland, we do not have ICE detention facilities. We banned that in 2021. However, ICE has found a way to somewhat circumvent that by prolonging the amount of time that they're keeping people in these, quote, holding rooms that are really like offices meant to be, you know, where people are meant to be held for fewer than 12 hours for processing before they're sent over to actual detention centers. We were receiving reports of people being in there for as long as 7 days, 12 days. There are no beds, no showers, no access to medication. So that is what we're seeing, right? And as I mentioned now, third country removals, people are being arrested, and something we actually did, I've been doing this work now for 15 years, never heard of anyone being deported to a third country. That wasn't a real thing. Now it is. And not only is it a real thing, it is happening with the United States government knowing that the person will be rerouted, be refiled to their home country, where a U.S. judge has found that if they are sent there, they will be harmed. So the U.S. government is finding ways to circumvent judicial orders and intentionally put people in harm's way. And it is indeed happening to Montgomery County, a Maryland resident. Kilmer is one, Rabiatu is one. And I'll just end with, well, I have one more thing, then I'll end. But like, you know, when people started hearing about Kilmer, right, it's like, well, he's supposedly MS-13. Oh, he had criminal history, and he's all these things. What about Rabiatu, right? There is no one type of person that is suffering from what is happening. It is all of us. Everyone is at high risk when that was not the case before. And the final thing that I'll say that we're seeing is, are two quick things. One, de-documentation of individuals. So I don't know, I think maybe some of you know that Maryland is home to the largest number of Cameroonian nationals outside of Cameroon. Cameroonian nationals were on what is called temporary protected status, right? So there are certain kinds of statuses that don't provide long-term permanent protection, but for a temporary period, they allow someone to live here lawfully. They're able to work here, right? The United States government, very early on in the administration, essentially terminated TPS for nationals from countries that had TPS, including the thousands of individuals here in Maryland who were on TPS from Cameroon. And finally, final, as far as trends, increased collaboration between ICE and local and state law enforcement. What do I mean by that? We are seeing an expanded effort, expanded action for ICE to essentially turn local and state law enforcement agents into ICE agents, right? I'm a Montgomery County resident. I expect my local police department to protect me, to serve me, and not that if I call to report a crime, that they will actually call ICE on me, or that ICE is who will show up at my door. I expect that if I get pulled over, I'm being pulled over by local officers and not by ICE. And so those are some of the trends that we are seeing. And I promise to keep my next answers shorter than that.
No, this is great.
Go ahead.
First, thank you for that. This is great. This is really good information. I know the PowerPoint will be available for folks afterwards. You know, I use the word kind of a disorienting period of time, and I can't believe, I keep saying this. We all keep saying this every week, it seems. I can't believe this is 2025 in the United States of America. But here you are presenting this information that, again, just reminds us of the moment in time that we're in. And I'm glad that you mentioned the detention facilities that are no longer present in Maryland, because we're working with ICE, working with Delegate David Moon and CASA and myself, we sponsored legislation to get rid of that, to make sure that dignity not detention, to make sure that Maryland was never a home. Our local detention facilities and our prisons would not be used as holding cells, getting money from the federal government to subsidize that practice. So Maryland is not, we don't have that in Maryland because of legislation that we passed. So, but that then feeds into the question of 287G. Everyone hears that. It's a section of the code in the U.S. code, but it really, it outlines these memoranda of agreement with state and local jurisdictions to deputize state and local officials to enforce immigration law. And there are three, can you kind of walk us through, there are three types of 287G agreement that you can engage in. One is the jail enforcement model. One is called the officer warrant service model. And then the other is the kind of the task force model. In Maryland, to my knowledge now, there are two of those agreements that are operational in Maryland in 8 jurisdictions across the state. So we have 24 counties, or 24 jurisdictions, 23 counties, 1 city, Baltimore City. 3 jurisdictions had these 287G agreements on the books before this latest Trump administration. That has now accelerated. We now have 8 jurisdictions in Maryland that have adopted these agreements. And to my knowledge, they've all been the warrant officer service model, I think, for the additional 5 that have come online. Can you just walk us through the various iterations of the agreement? What types of agreement are available? What do they mean? And what's happening in Maryland with regard to the 287G agreements?
Sure. And you've kind of given a great overview, so I won't go into too much more of that. But to speak a little bit more about each model, the task force model is the one that I'll start with. The task force model essentially allows officers, right, local and state law enforcement officers who are conducting regular routine police activity to act as ICE officials, right? Meaning with the task force model, if you get pulled over by someone, by a Germantown police officer, right, they are authorized, they are deputized to then interrogate you about your immigration status to determine whether you are in violation of any immigration law, right? Particularly, like, are you here unlawfully? And if that's the case, they can perform ICE functions that then land you in removal proceedings or, fast-track removal. The task force model is essentially, as I understand it, outlawed in the state of Maryland, right? Which was also part of the Dignity Not Detention Act in 2021. So law enforcement officers in Maryland are prohibited. They are prohibited from engaging in immigration law enforcement while they're out doing the job, right? Like outside of a jail setting. The warrant service officer model and the jail enforcement model are both only applicable within a jail setting. And now I've heard a lot of people, right, who will say, oh, well, it's just within the jail, so that's okay, right? Wrong. It's wrong, period. There's a lot that I can say about, the way in which our criminal legal system is utterly flawed, right? And the way, it treats black and brown people, right, in a systemic way. But the bottom line is someone who is merely arrested for a criminal offense should not be additionally penalized. Before they're even convicted of that offense, they should not then be penalized by bringing on immigration proceedings and deporting them before they're even able to go to court and stand trial and plead their innocence. That is not okay. So the warrant service officer model essentially allows jail officials to serve someone with an ICE warrant. They are able to execute that warrant, notify ICE. ICE will come and pick the person up, or they send the person to ICE. The jail enforcement model is essentially the kind of highest level of collaboration, if you will. not only does it allow the jail official to execute the warrant, it actually allows the jail official to like generate the warrant, right? The jail official is able to enter the Department of Homeland Security's database. They are able to interrogate the person about their immigration status, et cetera, and essentially perform the full functions of an immigration enforcement agent. Does that answer the question?
No, it does. It does perfectly. And you know, I'm chair of the Judicial Proceedings Committee, and I took our committee up to Hartford and up to Frederick to see these things up close, and we walked through those are both jail enforcement models, and we walked through it, and you've explained it perfectly. So thank you for that. That was very helpful. Now let's switch over to some of the more like fundamental rights, know your rights type things. So, you know, obviously you talked a little bit about due process. You talked a little bit about the Fourth Amendment issues. You kind of squinted towards it in your explanation. All of these rights apply to anyone who is present in the United States, regardless of your immigration status. Can you kind of just, you know, walk us through those things? And when you're doing that, can you kind of give us the distinction between what is an administrative warrant and what is a judicial warrant, and what's the legal consequence and difference between those two?
Absolutely. I have slides for that because it kind of gets a little complicated sometimes. So what I always start with, right, is that everyone has certain fundamental rights regardless of their immigration status. And the two main rights are the right to remain silent and the right to be free from unreasonable search and seizure. I'm going to explain what that means. Rights to remain silent, we got to break that down a little bit more. The basic interpretation, the way that I explain it to people, the basic interpretation of that Fifth Amendment right is when interacting with law enforcement, we have the right to not say things that might get us in trouble, right? And so within the immigration enforcement context, that boils down largely for people, you do not have to answer officers' questions. Now, in Montgomery County and kind of generally, it's very important to know which office, like who is the officer or what law enforcement agency, I should say, right, has stopped you and is attempting to ask you questions. Because my understanding is within Montgomery County, you are required to, when prompted, when asked, give your name, right? And so, but again, that's Montgomery County officials. That's not ICE. Those are two different law enforcement agencies. With the right to remain silent, there's a little bit of a caveat for individuals who are citizens versus, quote, registered within the U.S. versus undocumented. If you're a citizen, question for you. If you're a citizen of the United States and ICE says, what's your name? Show me your papers. Do you have to respond? Do you have to show them anything? I see a lot of head shakes. No, you don't. You can, let me not say what I was going to say. let me not say anything. You can
go about your day in a graceful manner.
You can go about your day in a graceful manner. Thank you so much, Senator. Absolutely, right? You don't have to answer their questions. If you are what is called registered, and meaning if you have essentially submitted your information to the United States government for immigration purposes, right? Like you've applied for a visa or you've applied for a green card, and now they have this registration requirement in which they are saying that all individuals who are here unlawfully must, quote, register, right? And not only must they register, they must show proof of registration upon request by an immigration official. Then you are required to show proof of registration. You are required to show that you are indeed registered. So if you have a green card and immigration officials ask you for it, you must provide it to them. If you are undocumented, right, again, if you are not registered, if you are here unlawfully, you can choose to simply exercise your right to remain silent. If you volunteer any information to them, well, obviously that is information that is only going to get you in trouble, so to speak, right? And there's no need to do ICE's job for them. Their job is to detect, detain, deport individuals. You do not need to do their job for them. Now, with that, I would say, right, do not give false information, do not lie, do not, give any fake documentation, right? Do not give a friend's ID. You can simply just not respond and not give them anything if you don't have anything to give. I would also say one of the things that we talk about a lot, right, is like what to carry, what not to carry. We always say if you have U.S. issued identification, for example, the driver privilege card here in Maryland, carry it. If you are here lawfully and you have proof of that, right, you should have proof of that, carry that. So if you are a green card holder, carry your green card. If you are an asylum applicant, carry a picture of your asylum application receipt notice, things like that. Carry, information of a trusted contact. Carry information of your lawyer, right? Who are you going to call if you encounter ICE or if ICE attempts to question you, detain you, arrest you? And I also say now, carry your phone to record interactions. We are allowed to record ICE, and let me take a step back. I keep saying ICE, but the reality is now we got every federal law enforcement agency conducting immigration enforcement, right? So it could be Park Police, it could be CBP, it could be the FBI, it could be HSI, and I know I'm using a lot of acronyms, sorry, but like all that to say, it could be any federal law enforcement agency that is attempting to conduct immigration enforcement. So these rights apply equally. So carry your phone so that you can record the interactions safely. And do not carry anything illegal, including drugs. I'm sorry that I have to say it, but yes, it's true. In this time, right, if you are at heightened risk for immigration enforcement, and I'm gonna also be very, very clear, there's a lot of racial profiling that's happening. If you are black or brown, or if you speak with an accent, we need to be very careful about what we carry. And then, as I said before, no, I actually did not say this before. Do not carry, we are saying do not carry foreign issued documentation. Again, do not do ICE's job for them. If you get stopped, if you get searched, and there's an ID that says, oh, Salvador, ID, well, again, you have done their job for them, as they now have this physical proof that you might not be a national of the United States of America. And then I know the second main right that I mentioned, right, the right to be free from unreasonable search and seizure under the Fourth Amendment. What this means is you have the right to refuse to provide consent for a search. And this could be a search of your person, right? This could be a search of your car, your purse, and most important, a search of a place where there's a reasonable expectation of privacy, like your home or like the private part of a business. And we're gonna go into that a little bit more. But if ICE comes a knocking on your door, and not just ICE, any law enforcement officer, right? They come a knocking on your door, do not open the door right away. You gotta be certain who is at the door, and if it is ICE or any of the other agencies that are working with ICE at this point in time, ask to see a warrant, and not just any warrant, a warrant that is signed by a judge. You do not consent to them coming in. You do not open the door, because if you open the door, and I've seen this happen, you open the door, the officer sticks their foot in there, they're in, right? There can be no implication that you have provided consent. So refuse entry until you see a warrant. They can slide it under the door, they can hold it up to the window or something. Do not open that door in an effort to see and examine the warrant. Keep the door shut. What I have seen is ICE doesn't, if ICE has a judicial warrant, they don't need your permission to come in. They're gonna knock down the door, right? So what we see more often happen is that you say, you don't have a warrant, I'm not opening the door. They leave, but of course they're going to try to find another way to be able to arrest you. And I also want to be clear, like they might still be able to conduct a search depending on whether they meet the legal requirements, which I'm not going to go into. But you know, again, it's very important to clearly state that you do not consent to the search and that you will not let them in, so that if they do come in anyway, at least there's a clear record that you did not provide consent, and then that can be used in a potential legal case later on. So I've talked about warrant, right? I think a lot of people understand this better now, and this is super unclear. I recognize that, but we will do our best to get through it. The first thing that we're looking at is a valid search and seizure warrant. Okay, when we say ICE needs a warrant to enter your home, this is what we're talking about. A warrant that is signed by a judge, it is issued by a court, right? And states very, very clearly, it must state clearly the person to be searched and or the things to be seized. What do I mean by that? And also the location. What I mean is ICE cannot attempt to enter with a valid judicial warrant. They cannot attempt to enter 1 North Charles Street if the judicial warrant specifies 2 North Charles Street. That is not the address that is stated on the warrant. It has to be the place that they're trying to enter with that warrant has to be what is stated on there. And another thing that I think a lot of people miss is the valid period of the warrant, right? The warrant might say valid until, I don't know, like December 8th, 2025. So if they try to enter on December 9th, 2025, is that warrant still good, and are you required to let them in with that warrant? Absolutely not. So it's important to examine the warrant. A lot of our community members don't necessarily know what to look for, but I always point out, and we have individuals who English is not the first language, right? But I will at least make sure that people can see and identify the word court up top and the word judge where the signature is. Like, look for these words. If you don't see those words there, do not open the door.
One question. That slide showed see attachment.
Yes.
What do you do when that? I mean, because this doesn't actually say much.
So
They put in the attachment. You insist on the attachment, which makes,
they,
We have people on Zoom.
oh,
So we'll repeat the question. Yeah. We'll go ahead and repeat the question.
the question was, what do you do when the judicial warrant says see attached? And oftentimes you will see that, right? Especially if there are items that need to be seized. So what we typically see with the judicial warrants is if there's some criminal element, right? And so the person might be suspected of dealing drugs or firearms or something like that. And so the attachment will usually also have like what the officers are like authorized to look for and seize. So that is essentially part of the warrant. And so everything that's meant to be part of the warrant should be included. That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
thank you, I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries at all. This is not a valid judicial warrant. This is a warrant issued by ICE for ICE. Okay? One of the things that and it's really hard for me to see, but like typically the signature line is going to say, right, signature of authorized immigration official. Authorized immigration official does not mean judge. An authorized immigration official does not mean an Article 3 judge, okay? Again, this administrative warrant is essentially saying, if you encounter this person somewhere, wherever that may be, you can arrest them.
Article 2 being legislative, Article 3 being judicial branch. Yeah,
Yes,
sorry,
thank you.
sorry,
Thank you so much. Article 1, executive branch. Article 2, legislative branch. Article 3, judiciary branch. And the reason that is important to mention is that the immigration court system, or the entire immigration enforcement system, so to speak, sits under the executive branch, which is problematic for a lot of reasons. But that's not what this conversation is about today.
Article 1 Congress, but.
Article 2, I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
yeah,
Article
yeah.
2 executive branch. That's
Jamie Raskin would kill me if I didn't correct you, so, you know.
No, thank you. Thank you so much. So what we're talking about, when we talk about judicial warrants, we're talking about warrants that are signed, right, and issued by Article 3 branch, the judicial branch. We're not talking about administrative warrants that are issued by the executive branch. Again, by ICE, for ICE, largely speaking. And so again, this essentially is saying, if you encounter this individual anywhere out on the streets, or perhaps they let you inside their home, or you encounter them at their church, something like that, you are authorized to arrest them. It does not give authorization to enter into a private space such as a home. Does that distinction make sense? Okay. Now, we talk about private spaces, public spaces. Can I talk about this really quickly?
Go for it. No,
Because
this is
this
great.
still
This is
kind of
fantastic.
ties into,
Yeah, yeah.
into what you were asking. Okay. People often think, okay, well, private space means it's privately owned, right? So if it's privately owned, then that means it's a private space, and so ICE can't come in. No. So a space that I often talk about is a faith space, right? Early on, about February, March, when I started having these conversations, I spoke a lot with faith spaces, right? And they're like, well, it's a church and it's on private property and it's private, so that means ICE can't come in, right? No, on the contrary, faith spaces are, right, it's come one, like welcome all, welcome anyone, all are welcome. And so like doors are literally left open so that people can walk in off the street. What I say is, if your neighbor can walk in off the street into that space, so can ICE. Okay? For example, the open lobby space of a business, right? Again, if any old Joe Schmo can walk into that space, so can ICE. Or the waiting area of a restaurant, right? That's a public space. Versus like the back kitchen, that is like, no, staff only, employees only. That's a private space. And also, sometimes a particular space can be considered a private space at certain times of the day, and then a public space at other times of the day, right? So again, for example, a church, maybe on Sundays from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m., because it's come one, come all, right? It is a public space because anyone can walk in, versus perhaps the later hours where the door is shut and it's locked. It is now a private space, and entry would need either consent or a judicial warrant.
So
Does that make sense? Go ahead,
no,
please.
this is great. So here's the quiz then. So let's say you have a public space, all right, but you have a private space, a private non-publicly accessible place within a greater public
Mm-hmm.
space. To go into that private space, what do you need? Do you need the ICE detainer, or do you need the judicial warrant? Judicial warrant. There you go. That's the distinction that.
That's it.
Yeah, right.
That's it. He just said in 5 words what I tried to say in 20 minutes. That's exactly right.
No, this is very, very
Yeah.
helpful. And again, I hope this information, we can make sure that everyone gets this stuff, so that
Absolutely.
it takes a while to absorb some of this stuff. So I want to make sure that people have it in writing as well. So thank you. Keep going. I'm learning
course.
a lot. This is great.
And the last thing that I'll talk about as far as rights is cars. This one is, I wish that I could get through it super quickly. I will try, but it is the first thing about rights when it comes to cars is really understanding who is pulling you over and for what purpose, right? Because if you are driving on the roadways in Maryland, what are you required to have? License, registration, insurance, right? And yeah, you're required to have that and you're required to produce it. So if you're driving and you get pulled over by a local law enforcement officer and they say license and registration, you gotta produce it, right? What about if you are the passenger in the car? Do you have to produce anything to the local law enforcement officer? You're not, right? Now, what about if it is ICE that has pulled you over? And I guess they pulled you over because, I don't know, they suspected that you're here unlawfully. What do you, like as the driver, are you required to produce license, registration, insurance? I hear a yes, I hear no's. What is ICE's job?
Immigration, not traffic.
Federal, exactly. ICE's job is to detect, detain, deport. It's not to enforce traffic laws, right? So if I'm driving and I'm a U.S. citizen or I'm here lawfully, whatever, and they say license and registration, I don't have to produce that. We go back to the same rights that you have here about rights to remain silent, right to refuse consent to a search, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? I do want to do a quick caveat because, again, we have different law enforcement agencies that are working with ICE, right? So, for example, Park Police is pulling people over on the parkways. And they're actually able to do that. It is within their mandates. And they're doing it with ICE. And they're doing it, and then they're calling ICE. And unfortunately, that is like perfectly within the law. So it can be ICE that's pulling you over, but in partnership with another agency that's able to, yes. And there was one more thing that I was going to say, but I forgot what it was, and I'm going to pass it over to the senator.
No, thank you very much for this. I know it's a lot of information. Like I said, we're going to distribute it, but this is all complicated enough, let alone if you have folks that are approaching your car or you're approach you in person and they're not self-identified or they have masks on. That adds another layer of complexity to even identify which decision tree you're going to exercise. So that'll kind of squint towards something we're going to talk about a little bit later. So I appreciate that. I've been told that we've got to move to the next section of our program. No, this is great. Of our program tonight, we can incorporate some of the services that CASA offers into some of the answers that come in. So right now we're going to move into the Q&A part. We've got I think about 100 folks online. So we're going to toggle between in-person and then folks that are watching us on the live stream. So we've got some microphones coming around. So just raise your hand. We'll start there and then we'll work our way over.
Hello, my name is Laura, and I live in Silver Spring 20910. Thank you for being here. Yes, good to see you. Questions about two pieces of legislation. So do you commit to firmly supporting legislation against all 287G agreements in Maryland and doing everything you can to bring it out of committee because ultimately your name is on whatever happens in committee? That's one question. Second, I've changed my mind on redistricting because fair play in a broader context means we have to take back the U.S. House of Representatives because we are so limited in what we can do. So do you commit to redistricting so that we can take back the U.S. House of Representatives? Thank you.
These are really tough questions here. So first, the answer to your first question is yes, absolutely. I've said that I've been clear and consistent that I think we should just get ourselves out of this business. And I said that last session when we were kind of going through, and the House did pass legislation, and we passed legislation in the Senate, but we did not get rid of the 287G programs. Just for some context, in the Democratic caucus, a lot of folks, we had some very tough discussions, and folks were, I think rightfully so, coming from a place of real compassion, worried about the repercussions that would be exercised in Maryland for SNAP benefits, for Medicaid, for the Francis Scott Key Bridge. Would Donald Trump activate the National Guard? All the community development block grants. But guess what? All of them but one thing have happened already. So and so I think it was coming from a source of real, legitimate concern. That sentiment, I believe, has changed. And so we are, I've committed and I've been clear and consistent as to sponsor legislation to get us out of this business for all 287G agreements. And not only that, in the Judicial Proceedings Committee, we are going to hold early hearings so that in the first week of session, we are going to be ready to vote and make this stuff happen. So, that's, I don't know if I'm breaking news there, but we're going to do that. So look for, in the next 2 weeks in December here, we're going to be holding some hearings on those, on that bill and on the masking bill to make sure that we are out of that business. I do want to just take, before, and then redistricting, yes, I'm committed to it. I've been, open about that. That's a larger conversation. This is an immigration, debate here or forum, but I do, if anyone ever wants to hear more detail about just the complexity of that issue and a Supreme Court case, the Common Cause case that happened in 2019, and then the Judge Battaglia case that happened in 2022, and our maps getting thrown out. And I know it's a circuit court decision, but it is persuasive, not controlling. There's a real, I think I think you really do have to think deeply about the repercussions. Maryland is 32% Republican. It wasn't that long ago that we had a 4-4 map. So people forget that. And so, you have to at least intellectually understand that there is a prospect of reverting back to at least 2 Republican seats if you engage in that. I don't fall on that side of the ledger, but I understand intellectually the argument, and I just think that it's a more complicated answer, is what I'm saying. But I'm with you on it, but I at least intellectually understand the complexity of the issue. Yep. So we're there.
Hi, I have way more down in the weeds questions. It's about if you're a U.S. citizen driving a car with a passenger who may be of interest to ICE. So on the Parkway, I know ICE has been pulling people over. I don't know if the interstates, Beltway qualify as federal versus state. Can ICE start asking the passenger? They can pull me over to make sure I'm driving correctly, but can they start asking the passenger in those circumstances? And the other question I have is, I have met people who have been detained despite they're registered people. They have work permits. So how is that legal?
Okay. Where do I begin? Okay, so why don't we start with the second one first, because I think that's a more straightforward answer. It's a horrible answer, but it's a more straightforward answer. This current administration's kind of approach has been arrest first, ask questions later. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the lawsuit CASA brought regarding warrantless arrest in Washington, D.C., and we just got the preliminary injunction decision 2 nights ago. And that's exactly what the judge said, right? What is happening is they're arresting first, asking questions later. So we have individuals who do have lawful status who are being arrested. And then we're seeing what we have not seen under previous administrations, which is that they're taking the position that even if, for example, you have a pending asylum application, that still doesn't make you, quote, lawful within the country. Or if you have temporary protected status, or even DACA. We're seeing DACA recipients who are being arrested. Even though they cannot be deported, the administration is making the arguments that they can still be detained. And so this is why, you see like almost every day there is a new lawsuit that is filed against the administration. So some of it is not legal, absolutely, right? But unfortunately, in the moment, there's almost always very little that the person who's being arrested can't do. And then the fight has to happen after the arrest has already occurred. To your first question about whether a passenger can be questioned, the answer is yes, a passenger can be questioned, but again, those same rights apply. Now, is that sufficient, or do you want me to go a bit more into? Sure. This is where you now get into questions about, are there like appropriate legal standards, for example, for ICE to smash the window and try to drag the person out of the car, or to search the car, things like that. But the short answer is yes, ICE can indeed attempt to question the passenger, but the passenger still does have rights that they can exercise. Those same rights apply. Oh, that's my turn.
It's more of a comment than a question, this idea that we're deporting criminals. There's a story that probably most people have heard of, the Vietnamese woman who owned a nail salon in Gaithersburg. And she had a felony conviction 30 years ago. She's paid off her fines, total restitution. But they decided we can deport her because she had some kind of conviction. Is that, they can just make it up, I guess? Is there some way to, because it seems to be a lot of the people who, even your data is right that most people don't have a conviction, and many of the ones who do, we've forgiven them. They've served their time, so it shouldn't be counting against them. But
yeah, it's this perpetual double punishment, right, situation that we see within the immigration legal system, right? And it is horrendous. I will say that the immigration statute and regulations are what they are. What changes per administration is how strictly they enforce it. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with the criminal legal system, where there's, right, there's a word that is used a lot within enforcement systems: discretion, right? So there's police discretion, there's prosecutorial discretion. The same with immigration enforcement. Typically, and what we have seen, each administration will have what it considers, quote, priorities, right? And so it will enforce the immigration law according to what its priorities are, right? In that, okay, there are so many potential immigration law violators within our community, and we have limited resources. So we need to focus our resources on our, quote, priorities. At the very beginning, at the very outset, literally the Maryland ICE director said, there is no such thing as discretion anymore. The handcuffs are off. That means everybody, right? And so that is, again, that is what we are seeing right now, is that everyone is high priority. Everyone is at risk. It is not about whether you have criminal history or not, or whether it was criminal history from 30, 40 years ago. You are a priority and you are at risk, period, which is a very problematic way to enforce the law.
Before we go to the next question, I do want to acknowledge that the Tacoma Park Chief of Police was here. I assume he went to handle some business, but he's been a tremendous partner, and just wanted to make sure that we acknowledge his presence. And then also the mayor of Tacoma Park is here. Don't ask her any tough questions, but she's here. So thank you for being here.
Michael DeLong, thank you for doing this. What about temporary protected status? It seems highly unfair that there are all these people who have been granted sort of refuge here, and then just with a stroke of the pen, they can be taken away, and now they're undocumented. Is there anything that the Maryland legislature can do to help them, or what should they know? Are they at risk of immediate deportation? Is there any safe harbor for them or something?
I'll let you answer that. Look, federal immigration, it's largely within the purview of the federal government, obviously. So there are only a few limited tools that we have in terms of how the state chooses to cooperate with the federal government. These are principles enshrined in the 10th Amendment. that gives us the dual sovereignty, that gives us a little bit of choice in the matter. And so things like the 287G agreements and so on, whether we're going to have dignity denied detention, whether we're going to cooperate with detention centers, those are left within the purview of the state. There are coercive measures that the federal government can use, like spending power, or they can threaten money and resources to the state to force us to comply if we don't want to. But those are principles enshrined in the 10th Amendment. So we do have limited tools, but we are sovereign as a state. And so, I would defer to you in terms of the federal piece, but we are pulling on all the levers that we can as a state. We talked about the masking bill a little bit. We didn't talk about the details of the bill, but that's something we can pass that legislation. But I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure how you enforce it. And so I just want to be wide-eyed about this stuff. So you're going to force interactions between state and local law enforcement and federal law enforcement to enforce it, and I don't know how that works in practice. And so it's an unsatisfactory answer, but we are pulling all the levers we can to do whatever we can under those principles that are in the 10th Amendment and the 14th Amendment. Yeah.
Okay, so it's not like if there's an enforcement, like if there's an anti-masking law that gets passed and there's interaction between local, state, and law enforcement and ICE, you couldn't do something like, say, you have to remove your mask, and if they don't, like, say, arrest them for attempted kidnapping, that just doesn't work?
So that theory has not been tested, right? And so, I mean, that's an interaction that would garner some news coverage. Yeah. Oh, sorry, and then we have to switch to Zoom questions, and we'll come back to the room. But go ahead. Yep.
No, I just wanted to add a couple of things to what you shared, right? And going back to the earlier statement that I made about immigration statute and regulations are what they are, the way administrations, choose to enforce them, right, vary with each one. But what's very important for us as a state and as localities is not being complicit in that. So following up on what you shared, right, again, thinking about what are the tools available to be able to roll back and really ideally just stop collaborating. They just got how much billions of dollars to do the work, right? We don't need to be also including Maryland money, Montgomery County money in helping them do that work of racially profiling, separating families, all the things. And so I also want to really highly commend Montgomery County for, I believe it's on Tuesday, the Trust Act is going to be introduced, which significantly rolls back the level of collaboration between local law enforcement and ICE. And so please be on the lookout for that. We need to support that. This is a huge, huge, huge win for our community. And then to your question about TPS, I think a tool that we need to be talking about more is litigation, right? CASA has been litigating against the administration since January, when was the swearing in? January 20th? And so since January 21st, we have been litigating. We brought our first lawsuit, birthright citizenship, right? And I also have to commend the Attorney General's office. Maryland Attorney General's office has been litigating left and right against the administration. So I think even places where it's untested, right, certain areas where it might not be, certain things may not be tested, perhaps it is the time to test them, right? We are not in ordinary times, and so we need to be thinking a little bit outside the box, creatively, about legislation, right, which we're so grateful to have our partners with us, and also litigation, thinking outside the box so that we can fight in all the various ways that we are able to.
Not to get even too esoteric about this, but we're coming up, on a pretty significant anniversary in the United States here from when the Declaration. So when you think about the founders and the creation of the Constitution and the first 10 amendments to the Constitution never would have been ratified if what weren't for the promise of those 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights coming forward. And our government is our federal government is one of limited and enumerated powers. It's because the founders were fearful of a strong centralized government that would reach into the states and control everything. And so the 10th Amendment says that all those powers that are not enumerated are left to the states and the people. And so just always remember that when you think about this interaction. That's, as a legislator in the state, I always frame my thinking through that, because it helps me understand where those left and right limits are, and where I think where the federal government is more intrusive in coming into the state and doing these things. That's why things like the anti-commandeering doctrine are very important. Understanding spending power clauses and what tools the federal government can use to coerce us, and what theories we can use to defend ourselves for saying, hey, listen, you can't come in here and take our police, for instance, and use them for immigration enforcement without our consent. So these are things that I think, not to draw too much back, but just when you're thinking about these things, I think it's important to understand that in the context of this recent history, of this new history we're about to celebrate coming up in a few short months. But all right, we're going to go to a Zoom question, and how are we going to facilitate that? Is Jenna going to read it out? Okay, great.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Got it?
we can. Yep.
Okay. So we have a question from the chat. It says, the Frederick County Sheriff said if 287G agreements are banned, there are other ways to assist ICE. Can you talk about what those actions would be and what the state legislature can do to thwart those actions?
So, that's interesting. If you ban an agreement, which is just a memorandum of understanding, that doesn't say that the local jurisdictions can't cooperate under their own volition. They just won't be subsidized. They won't have the training, which is minimal, and they won't have access to their little portal that's in the station, and they won't be formally deputized. If you look at what we did for the dignity not detention, or when we curtailed our 287G agreements to the jail enforcement model, and the officer warrant service model instead of the field enforcement model, we didn't actually draft the legislation to get rid of the agreement. We drafted the legislation to get rid of the activity, to preclude the activity. And so I think that's where the answer is. There's the agreement, which is just the paper document and contract, the MOU. But then there's the activity. And I think a more clever drafting might be in curtailing the activity and not just the agreement. So I think that could be the answer, but I don't know.
Look, I think that is true, right? In that there are different ways in which law enforcement agencies can collaborate with ICE. And I think here in Maryland, I think almost every county, right, collaborates with ICE in some way, shape, or form. So 287G doesn't ban, or ending 287G doesn't end collaboration with ICE, but it stops our officers from being ICE, right? Which I think is a very important distinction that we need to make.
And I'm not sure we can do that. I mean, I'm not sure we can legislate voluntary interactions with the federal government. I'm not.
Right. And I mean, I think that's.
I mean, that's the whole conundrum with this whole thing.
It is, absolutely. But I think that it is important for us to not get bogged down by, okay, well, they're going to find a way to figure something out anyway. Okay, good luck trying to figure something out. You can't be ICE. You can't have a 287G agreement, period, right? So we have to start somewhere. And I think that what has been happening, and really what has been a core tenet of the last 10, 11 months is trying to overwhelm us, trying to make us feel like, there's so much going on, we can't even make a dent. And I want us as, we the people to actively fight back against that, right? Remember that we the people are the ones that have the power. So, okay, sure, there might be other ways to collaborate with ICE. Okay, we hear that. We the people want you to stop being ICE, and we're going to make sure that you do not act as ICE officers. So that is my response to that.
And the short answer is, I don't know. I mean, because it doesn't preclude them from voluntarily going ahead and doing it. And but it does prevent from being deputized.
Right.
From a formal deputy, so that's very significant.
Yes.
So the answer is, yeah, that's the answer, I guess. Clear as mud.
Clear as mud.
Another question from the chat was, could you outline what key actions or shifts need to occur within the General Assembly to successfully pass the bill seeking qualified defense for immigrants?
Qualified defense for immigrants.
Probably universal
Oh.
representation. Is that?
Maybe, like civil Gideon type thing,
Is there a way to seek clarification on that question?
If
But
it's- yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I would
They
say,
said, correct, qualified lawyers for immigrants.
okay.
Right.
So we've taken significant steps in the Maryland General Assembly to do things to ensure civil representation for things like evictions. And we found, we found a funding source for that through the Abandoned Property Fund. To fund this would be very costly, and we have a $1.7 billion, $1.4 billion shortfall this year, following a $3.4 billion last year. So it would require a funding source, a significant funding source that I don't see where is available at this moment.
Can I take a step back to provide a bit of context? Because I think people don't realize that there is no court-appointed system within the immigration deportation machine. I don't think people realize that. So if you are arrested by ICE or if you are in deportation proceedings, you have the right to an attorney at your own cost. If you can't afford one, too bad, so sad, right? And the overwhelming majority of individuals don't have attorneys, which is having even more of a significant impact now because of the ways in which the government is trying to circumvent the legal system, right? So individuals are being arrested illegally. Individuals are being deported rapidly without ever seeing a judge, without ever getting a chance to attempt to defend themselves. And so access to counsel is vital. Access to counsel is vital, and we do not have a court-appointed system, which would be funded by the state or localities. And so that is the context that I wanted to give.
But you all step in and fill a lot of that breach. So you may talk about some of the services you all provide.
Absolutely, yes. And then adding to that, we have been able to secure funding in past sessions for representation of detained individuals in immigration court. And so we are immensely, immensely grateful. And so some of the work that we do is actually funded by that universal representation money. And I'm trying to get through this. Okay, so one of the services that I of course want to highlight is legal support that we provide. Senator Smith mentioned access to counsel and evictions. We are recipients of some of that funding also, and so we provide representation to tenants who are facing eviction. We provide workers' rights legal support, immigration legal support, of course, vocational training, job placement, tax support, financial literacy, ESOL classes for adults, youth engagement program. So there are a variety of services that CASA provides across the board within the state. And that is the number that individuals can call to seek services from CASA. And the other resource that I want to make sure that I highlight, this is our rate tip hotline, okay? So whenever you witness an ICE encounter, right, you or the loved one of the person who was the victim of that ICE encounter can call the rate tip hotline so that we can provide, necessary social and legal support that the person might need. So those are just a couple of resources that I think are very, very important for folks to walk out with today.
So I saw this gentleman here, and then we'll go to Scott. But, sir, yes. You got it.
Thanks. My name is Ken, and I live up the road in Silver Spring. I just had a legislative question. Illinois, in their recent session, end of October, passed a bill that forbade immigration enforcement in and around state courthouses. Mm-hmm. They also included a measure in that bill that would allow citizens of Illinois, or residents of Illinois rather, to sue ICE for violating their constitutional rights should such an arrest take place. My question to you is Maryland going to consider a similar bill, and if so, would you support it?
Sure. I have not heard of such a bill coming forward, but hey, I see we've got some good civil rights attorneys in the back. So Tom Gagliardo back there. I think if someone violates your civil rights, you have a right to file it's called a 1983 claim. So you could file that already if someone violates any manner of your civil rights. So that's something that's available to you already. I don't know if you could create a new civil right of action under state law for a federal official in that regard, but happy to look into that. And in terms of the locations and restricting courthouses and things like that, we worked extensively with our Attorney General to ensure that we had a bill that called Sensitive Locations Bill, included things like courthouses and things like that. But the Attorney General, it's the people's attorney, but they have a responsibility to defend the state. They step into the shoes of the state to defend the state against lawsuits. Obviously, they intervene to protect our civil rights. But for other entities like private entities, or even for the courthouses, for instance, that's another kind of a separate branch of government. There are interesting issues that arise in terms of what the Attorney General can do in terms of enforcement there. But what we did was the Attorney General now promulgates guidance that has to be adopted by all of the executive branch agencies. That guidance basically outlines a lot of what you went over today about private spaces and judicial warrants and administrative warrants. So that outlines that, and it requires our governmental entities to adopt these regulations. But for the Attorney General to say, hey, you private entity have to do X, Y, and Z, you get in some really murky water, which I don't know is enforceable in terms of you have to adopt these policies to prevent ICE from coming into this. It's difficult. And then when you do that for the judicial branch, there are separation of powers issues that arise. The judicial branch, we've worked with the chief judge, and they have developed their own policies for how to handle immigration enforcement. What we've seen happen, though, is that the courthouses have some sort of policy that's there that maybe doesn't get tested in terms of that federal-state interaction, but then they just snatch people when they're 100 yards away or something like that. So when they leave the courthouses, then so that's what in practice I've seen is happening.
Sorry, just to add one thing to that. The bill in Illinois does add a provision, including a buffer zone around state courthouses of about 1,000 feet.
About 1,000 feet. I'll look into that. That's great. Yeah.
Scott Weber, thank you very much for the forum. Some of us are a little blonder, a little whiter, a little more blue-eyed than others, and along with that comes a certain privilege, if not a responsibility, I would say, towards helping those who can't have the same voice. So my question is more along the lines of what advocates can do in support, and where the threshold of legal right of an advocate who may, for example, encounter something going on with ICE. Now, do we as advocates have the right to intervene? Can we jump in and ask, show me your warrant. I want to see the warrant. Can you go in and say, I need you to identify yourself. I need to see your ID. I need to see your name. I need to see this. Can you have a group of people do that? I have a camera. I want to do this. Did they give you consent? Did they give you consent? Get that recorded so that you're demanding that they become part of the interaction. Can you, for example, ask, did you give consent? Is this a private space? Can you have them withdraw consent on right? So a whole bunch of what advocates can do. Where is the threshold of what they're allowed to do, even in the middle of an intervention, as opposed to before an intervention or even afterwards? So it's a sort of a general question about where can advocates get involved, if they are willing to put themselves at risk too, to be able to demand the legal rights that are there and to intervene on behalf of someone who may have their hands already cuffed, et cetera. So could you speak to the rights of interveners or support?
Absolutely. Yes, that's a great question. So CASA does what we call bystander trainings. Always, and I urge you to, I see one of CASA's development staff here in the crowd who can make sure to add anyone who wants to be added to a CASA allies list, right? Which, would, also like provide information about the bystander trainings that we do whenever we have them. But the very, very condensed version of what we share in those trainings, I need to be honest with you, right? I have encountered many, many well-meaning bystanders and allies, right, who sometimes end up making the situation worse. So as a bystander, the goals, right, should always be safety and de-escalation. And so oftentimes when you have a well-meaning bystander who wants to physically intervene, that actually ends up escalating the situation. I think the biggest couple of things that bystanders can do when they're witnessing active ICE encounters are, one, document, right? We have, oh, I don't have my phone. Let's pretend this is a phone, right? We have in our hands now one of the greatest tools that we can to document, record, right? And when we say record, I'm gonna use you, Senator Smith. So let's say you're a person, something's happening, right? We say document, record, but record the actor and not the person who's being acted against. Because sometimes the video ends up going around, viral, right? You want to protect people's privacy. So record what the actor is doing, what is the officer doing, and also narrate when you're recording. I'm standing at the corner of such and such street. I see 3 officers. They have handcuffed this man who just keeps saying he wants to go home. They have thrown him to the ground, right? Document that, because again, oftentimes during the arrest, there's not much that we can do. And I think there's a misconception that like CASA will run out there and put an end to this arrest that's happening and everything will be okay. Unfortunately, that's not the case, especially not under this government. So document it well. And then send it to mutual aid groups, rapid response groups like CASA so that we can act on it. The second important thing bystanders can do is try to gather information from the person who's being arrested, right? Name, and is there a phone number that I can call to let someone know what is happening to you? And then generally speaking, because I have to move on, generally speaking, like outside of the active arrest situation, show up. Show up, share people's stories. If there's a court hearing, pack the courtroom. If there's a protest, show up, because our people cannot do that right now. We're not going to court when you have Department of Homeland Security court marshals standing outside the courthouse. We're not going to protest when you're seeing ICE officers marching down the streets along with you, right? So showing up, making clear that you're paying attention. And I think Carrie wanted me to move on.
Yeah, I think, so we have another section where we're going to talk about the legislation, but we've already kind of talked a little bit about that. So maybe we'll bump out the Q&A a little bit longer because we've had some questions that already talked about the legislation. So Scott is next, and then we'll get here, and then we'll come over here. We got you.
Hi, thanks very much. I know there's a very active ICE Watch group, here in this area, and it's very helpful, and I've been active in it. But the question is how can we learn more about what ICE's strategy is and where we expect them to go, so that we can be there as opposed to spending a lot of time in places where they're not going, because we want to be mindful of our resources. And I know that they've been to Home Depots, and we've been trying to protect the food pantries and the schools, but we can't be everywhere. So what have we learned about their strategy, about where we expect them to go?
That is an excellent question. And so one of the the primary purposes of CASA's rate tip hotline is to be able to gather exactly that information so that we know how are they acting so that we're not always in reactive mode, right? Honestly and truly, the biggest thing right now is they are arresting individuals who are actually doing what they're supposed to be doing and showing up to their appointments. So the vast majority of arrests are happening at ICE check-ins. They're happening at USCIS appointments. And they are also happening outside of like people's homes, right? As you know, people are leaving for work or leaving to go pick up their kid from school. So it's really hard to predict exactly where they're going to be. And it's actually also Tamara is one of the attorneys on my team. It's been a while since we've heard of like operations. A few months ago, like we were able to track like, okay, every Friday or like every weekend there was some operation that was happening, right? And so we would Baltimore City home Highland Home Depot, and then the next day another Home Depot. It's been a while since we've had like very clear operations that are happening, but I think like we always have at the top of our mind day labor hotspots, right? So Home Depot, 7-Eleven, U-Haul. So we actually operate and adopt a corner program also, where there are people who are in these hotspots areas where we're doing know your rights. We're giving know your rights information, and just kind of keeping watch. But all that to say, I don't have a solid answer for you right now because frankly, it has been a while since we've seen some of these like more targeted operations happening. But I think honestly, and I mean, we're speaking openly now, right? I think, look, with the, with this, like they're trying to open a new office here in Montgomery County, right? I think that we are going to start seeing more of that once they're actually like physically present on the ground with office space. We will actually start seeing more activity within the county and be able to better see how it is that they are operating. Is that a somewhat kind of answer for you?
Thank you.
I'm going to pass out for people like the gentleman pointed out. There's a local group, the Community Safety Support Network, and if you're interested in doing any of these kind of active volunteer things like looking out at food bank pantries, going to courtrooms as witnesses. It's a pretty comprehensive group, so I'll just pass it out if you're interested in getting a hold of them. Find out what they're doing, la la la.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you. I'm Diane Seifert. I'm a Bethesda resident, but my two sons and their young families live here in Tacoma Park.
It's never too late for you to come over.
Oh, I'm here a lot. My question is not specifically the federal relationship right now, and it may be more appropriate to come back when you talk about the legislative agenda, but I want to know, Senator Smith, whether there will be or whether you would support tenant rights, especially the just cause eviction, which isn't just for immigrants, obviously. But we have so many federal workers out of work. Most of our immigrants, which is high proportion of our population, are renters.
Yeah.
And the renting provides security and stability for our communities, for them. And the chaos going on now is really upending landlords' ability to take advantage of eviction. So would you support that in in the General Assembly.
No, I appreciate the question, and this is a housing issue, but it shows you how all these issues are just interconnected. And so the short answer is yes, and I think the answer is yes is the short answer. I think broadly speaking, in Maryland, we have a housing crisis. We have 96,000 units. We're 96,000 units short, and we were actually experiencing some sense of out-migration, specifically within the population between 20 and about where I'm at in my early 40s, because people can't afford to live here. And so you have folks that are working in Pennsylvania, but are living in Pennsylvania or working here in West Virginia and Delaware and such, and Virginia. And so we do need to provide more housing, and I know that's a zoning issue, but that's also an issue of regulation. And I think, I don't want to get into all those issues, but I think we need to understand that we need to create more housing in Montgomery County and in Maryland. And so you want more housing, more affordable housing, more secure renters. I think for people that don't understand what good cause is, it's essentially, you sign a lease for a year or 6 months or month to month, and at the end of that term, the landlord can say, hey, I'm no longer interested in having this relationship with you, so you've been a great tenant, but off you go. That's the current status of the law right now. What this bill seeks to do is say that you have to have you have to have a good cause for you to cancel that person's lease. And I think all of us can agree that if you are a tenant that's paying rent on time, you're clean, you're safe, you should be able to stay. And so that's what that bill does. And so I do support it with the understanding that we need to also focus on creation of new housing and more housing, more affordable housing. And I think stability is part of that, especially for vulnerable populations. So that's the short answer, but just giving you a little bit more broader scope of the housing discussion in Annapolis. Mm-hmm.
Hi.
Yes.
Is somebody else?
And then Frank, we'll get you, and then in the back corner. Go ahead. Yeah, you're next. Go ahead.
Hi there. So I do transparently have a follow-up question to that, because I know in the last session there was a good cause eviction bill that had made it to the committee that you chair.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the hangups is that there was a disagreement over vacancy control.
Mm-hmm.
I believe a majority of the council had supported a clean bill, and so I would like, and that's important because if we're addressing affordable housing, then the ability for a landlord to significantly increase the price of a vacant unit, that creates a perverse incentive. My understanding is that local jurisdictions understand their constituents' needs, and again, we need to be attacking, as you said, all the interrelated ways that we're increasing existing vulnerability for residents. So would you support a clean just cause eviction bill?
So we had this discussion last night, actually, just in this very room with the Tacoma Park City Council. So understanding that in Montgomery County, and you saw these statistics, that we adopted rent control and we have vacancy control here. And I'm not doing correlation or causation, I'm just giving you the facts, that the amount of permits for multifamily housing units has dropped precipitously since the adoption of those measures, okay? And so you do need to be wide-eyed about the ecosystem that you're creating. Are you creating a non-permissive environment for people to come in and build new things? Do I think the good cause is going to do that? Absolutely not. Do I think we need to be understanding how when we stack regulation on regulation on regulation, that can push people out of the housing business, and that means the cost will go up. It means the current value, the current standard of the housing stock goes down because no one's going to reinvest in it. So there's a lot of things you got to understand when you're doing this. It's complicated. And so that's my broader answer. So I want people to be forced to have that conversation and to look those facts in the eye, because when you don't have new housing coming online, housing prices go up. It's simple supply and demand. So I just want to make sure that we're having those wide-eyed conversations. But the answer is, look, I mean, I think it's enabling legislation, okay? So each jurisdiction can choose to adopt it or not. And what I've put forward, what I talked about last night, was basically adopting the same structure that Montgomery County has for vacancy control and for rent control, which is the same standards. So in Montgomery County, I know this is an immigration form, not turning into housing form, but in Montgomery County, we've capped rent control up to 6% every year, so you can't raise your rent more than 6%. Average rents go up 2.5% to 3% every year, but in Montgomery County, the county council passed a law that says you can't go above 6%. For vacancy control, which says that if you leave a unit, you cannot, the landlord cannot put that unit back on the market at market rate. They have to cap it. That's what vacancy control is. And you can earn points, so to speak, if you don't raise your rent. Like if you don't raise your rent 4%, 5%, 10%, whatever, up to 6%, you can, whatever you don't do under 6%, you can earn credits for the vacancy piece. Very complicated. But the point is this. What I've proposed is doing good cause and just adopting the good work that Montgomery County did and adopting those same standards statewide. So again, it's enabling legislation, and so a jurisdiction in Hartford County or Talbot County could adopt good cause, but if they also chose to do vacancy control or rent control, they'd have to do what we did here in Montgomery County. So that's what I've put forward, and so if you adopted it, it would change nothing that we do here in Montgomery County if you adopted the bill that I put forward. That's the entry point for the discussion, and so we'll see where the legislation goes, but I'm committed to getting a bill out. So I just want to be transparent with you, but that's the entry point. Yeah.
Thank you.
It's really, complicated, but yes.
Sorry.
And then we got here next then, because I know you've had your hand up. After whoever has the mic, Frank has got the mic, and then next to here. So you're on deck. Okay.
Okay. Hi, my name's Franca Brilliant. I'm a longtime resident of Tacoma Park. I want to thank you both for taking time. This is a lot of time and energy that you're investing in educating the community, and we really appreciate it. Senator Smith, I had actually two questions for you. One was you referenced a masking bill.
Mm-hmm.
Could you say a little bit more about that? And the second was you also talked about something that I'm really concerned about, which is the state's deficit.
Yeah.
And what that downward pressure is going to do to the benefits that are being offered to people in general, but also especially to the immigrant community. If you could address that a little bit, that'd be great.
Yes, so the masking bill, Senator Malcolm Augustine has it on the Senate side, and Delegate Nicole Williams has it on the House side. It would require, I haven't read all of the details of the latest iteration, but generally speaking, it would require for federal ICE enforcement agents to not have masks, and then also clearly identify the agency and the name, which is what we require of every officer, unless they're in plain clothes or a detective, but that's what we require. So that is what that bill essentially does. Correct me if I'm wrong, but if in terms of the substance. But I did allude to this earlier. It is just want to be open about this. The enforceability, and we talked about this with Michael earlier. The enforceability of something like that is very complicated, and the interactions that you could see, I think, get extremely complicated, because you're going to ask a state or a local law enforcement officer to is the only person that could ask that person to enforce it, and that's a federal law enforcement officer now interacting with the state or local law enforcement officer, and I think that gets very complicated and difficult. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't stand by our values and pass that and say, hey, listen, in Maryland, like you really should be doing this. How it's enforceable, open question. For the deficit, I think we made $1.6 billion in cuts last year and $1.2 billion in revenue. We are going, this is an election year, being frank, and no one likes to raise taxes in an election year. So what I think you're going to see are some significant cuts, and I don't know where they're going to come from, honestly. And that is coming at the same time where you're seeing SNAP and Medicaid in particular. Those are the two that I'm most concerned about, and I think relates to the population that we're kind of talking about tonight. The state has committed to backfilling that money, and we were supposed to get reimbursed when the government shut down. You heard all that dialogue. Does that continue? Is there going to be another shutdown in January? These are all open questions that are very scary. And so the answer is I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. We are going to have to make some significant cuts this next legislative session. I just don't think there's an appetite for new revenue. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news. So we've got yes, and then in the back. Yeah.
I'm Sue Wheaton. I'm with the Immigrant Safety Network, a small group here in Tacoma Park. I live in Tacoma Park. I just want to mention that there was a group, I don't know their name, but they were selling whistles for $1 each, I think, up at the market, at the Sunday market. And I think I want to just mention and ask you if you think this has potential. I think it's it's just a whistle with a black cord around your neck as an organizing tool. And also, you know, for our observer, if you see something, and there was a little code, if you see ice forming somewhere, and you're saying they don't form much anymore, but if you did see that, it would be a little beep, 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 beep on your whistle. And if they were taking somebody, it would be just a blast, an ongoing blast with the whistle. Well, it just seems to me that to amplify that and to have more people, it would be, I think, a fabulous symbol that people could wear to show support, you know, for immigrants and their safety. And I don't know what ICE might do if it took on. It's also, if you're wearing one, somebody will say, well, what's that about? And you'll find everybody's in agreement with protecting immigrants here. At least here in Tacoma, in our part of Maryland, they are. And anyway, I just wanted to mention that, and you know, just throw out the idea of amplifying that effort and using it as a symbol.
It's a worthy investment of $1. I'd do that for $1.
Would you wear it?
I could part ways with my dollar for that.
If people would wear it all the time, be ready, you know, then it could become a symbol of.
Where do you find them again? In the market?
Yeah, right. But I think we could start getting them. It's the Silver Spring Market and other places,
yeah, that's right.
and reach the larger population who want to do something, but what to do, you know. Yeah.
Cool. All right, in the back, in the green, and then we'll come back over here and extend it. We got, okay, fine. We're going to take these last couple questions, and then we're final wrap up here.
Colleen Cordes from Tacoma Park. Thank you. Really, really appreciate both of you and spending all this time. My question, Senator Smith, is that I guess I'm asking, will you keep an open mind to the idea that the state might be able to come up with some kind of creative funding to help with the legal representation of people being detained? Because that does seem to be, correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe the largest unmet need. That it can be maybe like $10,000 for a person. I'm not, and if you figure 3,000, let's say there's 3,000 people in Maryland who've been detained. You said it was like 2,200 or something in the summer. So multiply that by 10,000. I think that's like 30 million. So I just want to call out the number. Correct me if I'm really in the wrong universe on that. But so I'm not necessarily saying asking the state to fund a $30 million program, but maybe a $15 million or a $5 million or something, and think about some creative public-private partnerships that you might write into a law. And maybe you're already doing that. I'd love to hear about that. I'm thinking about like maybe attorneys who would be offered some kind of compensation, but would generate more work out of that than they would generally be paid for it. Anyway, are you open to the idea that there could be some state money this year for that super, super unmet need? Thanks.
No, I think even in an austere environment that we're facing, there is an appetite for us to channel resources into our values and into protecting who we are as Marylanders, and that's part of it. And so I'm certainly obviously open for it and would advocate for it. And what I'm saying is that I don't foresee a significant large infusion of money, hundreds of millions of dollars or tens of millions of dollars. But we should invest money, continue to sustain our funding levels, and I think you may even conceive of even some increases. I'm being honest with you, I don't see large increases, but some increases to signify that we are really leaning into protecting our values as Marylanders. I do think there is an appetite for that, even in this budgetary environment. I just don't know. I just don't know what that's going to look like. I know we've got Zoom. I want to just hit 2 more here, and then we'll go to the Zoom question. And folks have been, and then we'll wrap it up.
Hi, I've also been part of a local organization that's just been doing a safety network, providing watches at pantries and raising money for affected families. And you know, we talked a little bit about what people can do on that level, but is there anything else that, you know, you would recommend, either of you, just for people that maybe aren't available during the 40 hours that those courts are open, other things that we might be able to do or advocate for?
Yeah, sure. You know, interestingly, I gave a talk last week and I shared all these different ways. Volunteer, court watch, etc. And then someone, you know, put their hand up and, you know, was like, what about those of us who can't physically show up? Like, and we want to support with our pockets. And I was like, oh, you're right. I didn't think about that. Yes, please donate, right? I mean, look, I really appreciate you raising that question about funding for legal support. We're in a crisis, y'all. We're in a major crisis. Like, my team that's here will tell you, the hardest part of our jobs right now is telling people that we don't have capacity to support them. Like, we just don't. And we refer them to other nonprofits that say the same thing, or they're operating wait lists that are 6 months long. Like, that, we're in a legal defense crisis for the immigrant community. And so I think really, like, supporting with funding and leaning on, like, I hear you, Senator Smith. I understand that it might not be conceivable, but, like, we're in a place where, like, it just has to happen. And so I think really leaning on our elected officials, right? Like, really, you know, pushing our elected officials to prioritize what we're saying, Maryland, like, these are the values that we hold most dear, really, really pushing them to live and show us that that is true. So I think, you know, really like cluing into the legislative session, right? And just calling senators, representatives, writing the letters, signing the petitions, all the things, right? Making sure that they have no choice but to listen to us, I think is very, very important. And I want to, you know, and if there's anything else that you want to add to that. Perfect. Let's not give the senator a pass, right? Like, we love him.
No one is
He's
Tacoma
great.
Park. You know
He's
where you are. No one
champion.
gets a pass here.
But at the same time, we need you to get this done
That's
for
good.
us, you know?
Yes, sir.
I have a question about Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who is our neighbor and a fellow union member. Could you comment on his case, and how is he and his family doing?
Oh, I mean, it's hard to, it's just been, like, I can't believe we're still here, how, like, 8 months later, still fighting a battle to now prevent his deportation to Liberia. When before it was Eswatini, and then Uganda, and then Ghana, and now Liberia, right? After having sent him over to El Salvador to be knowingly tortured. I'm not sure if you all have seen the news reports. I think it was the Washington Post that had interviews with several of the individuals who were in that prison, detailing the horrendous torture that they suffered. And our government knew that that was what was going to happen when they sent them over. So I mean, you know, Jennifer, his wife, is one of the strongest people that I've ever met. We were chatting earlier today. I mean, you know, she's just trying to keep strong for her kids, right? Because her kids need her. Her kids are leaning on her. And I think, you know, I'm not going to, I can't really talk about how Kilmer is doing. I think there is hope, but there's also a lot of frustration. And it's getting harder and harder to keep the hope after eight months, right? I think one of the greatest rays of sunshines, and one of the things that we keep on holding to, and that the family keeps on holding to, is that for one weekend in August, he was a free man, right? He walked out of a jail, he went and got a haircut, he went and got a Subway sandwich, he held his kids, right? For one weekend, he was a free man. And so there is hope and there is faith that that will happen again. So cases are ongoing, both the sham criminal case in Nashville as well as the unlawful detention case here in Maryland, and we're hoping that we get a decision in the Maryland case within the next couple of weeks. We just had the last hearing right before Thanksgiving. So that's the update that I can give you.
Thank you for that question. We're going to go to Zoom. There's one country in the world that has a capital named after an American president. Do you know what country that is? Monrovia, Liberia. Pull that one out the next cocktail hour. All right.
Okay. For Senator Smith, can you confirm that you were supportive of a full, clean ban on 287G agreements with no amendments that water it down?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
I knew that was
an easy one. Yeah.
Then the LA Dodgers have asked ICE to stop arresting people in their parking lots, even though this is a public space. Can other businesses do this?
I mean, you can ask, are they going to abide by it? I think it's back to the private versus public space, right? If it is a space that is open to the general public, ICE can certainly come on to that space and ICE can conduct enforcement activities on that space.
All right, that will be the final question. Thank you, Carrie.
Oh, I don't want to end on that very depressing note.
I'll give you an opportunity to just give us some parting words and some wisdom.
Oh, sure. Look, one thing that I just kept thinking about, as we were having the Q&A, was the number of people who said that they were part of kind of network groups, mutual support groups. That always, honestly and truly, that is what keeps me going, is the fact that so many people care and so many people want to do something and are looking for a way to support. The reality is we cannot do this work alone. CASA cannot do this work alone. Senator Smith cannot do this work alone. I have to give a shout out to the Montgomery County Immigrant Rights Collective that has showed up in such a major way, and 100%. And so many other mutual support groups, right, that are, trying to think through creative ways that we can support the community. So I really just want to say thank you, and I feel so grateful and so honored to be in this fight with all of you. For some of us, this is truly the fight of our lives, right? I never thought in the time that I've been doing this work, and as an immigrant myself who was once an undocumented immigrant, right? I never thought that I would be seeing, children being so afraid to go to school. I never thought that I would see people being afraid to go to the hospital. I never thought that I would see a CASA member and client pass away because he was arrested when he was on his way to receive life-saving dialysis treatment. Arrested by ICE. I never thought that I would see that. So I really do believe that for many of us, this is the fight of our lives, and I'm so honored to be in this fight with those of you who are in the space and with you. And honestly, we always say at CASA, when we fight, we win. And I truly believe that we are going to win in a major way, protecting and defending our community. So that is what I have to say.
Look, thank you. I'll just say this. Thank you. Look, when I first ran for office, there was a Tacoma Park City Council person that said, one of the greatest tools you'll have as an elected official is the tool to convene. You can call people from across the country, across the state, across your county, bring folks, experts like yourself, together and CASA, and you can convene, people come together, especially in a community like this, and you can discuss things, you can help solve problems. This was an opportunity for us to convene, and I just really appreciate the city of Tacoma Park for facilitating this, the staff, CASA, thank you for being here. Ama, thank you all for being here. And most importantly, thank you all for participating in this process. And on we go. If you ever need anything, you know how to contact me. My card's in the back. But thank you so much for being here. Ama, thank you so much. CASA, thank you so much. And have a good night. We got this.
Thank you.